Kacey Musgraves, Album of the Year winner at the Grammys not too long ago, is back with a new album, Deeper Well. Of course, since that win, I definitely feel as though there's been a newfound love for her music, and she's been a much more popular artist, and there's been a bit more demand for her as a musician, as a country star, maybe just as a general singer-songwriter, you know, in the world of singer-songwriters. She's definitely seen some pretty nice success. With that in mind, though, I feel as though since that success, her music hasn't quite been as engaging or as exciting or as unique. Her album that came after this, Star-Crossed, which for me at the time was like the worst album she'd put out so far. Still don't really feel any more positively towards it, to be honest with you, but I still had hopes for her as an artist. I didn't want to write her off just because of that. I still feel as though there's something there, and an artist that gave us Same Trailer, Different Park all those years ago still has a lot of talent. There's still some interesting writing ideas, and surely that isn't just going to go away. However, with this new album, Deeper Well, the thing I will say is that it hasn't exactly come back. Don't get me wrong, I did like Golden Hour as an album. I still think it's a good album now, but in terms of the writing, it was pretty clear to see that it wasn't exactly the most unique. It was pretty simplistic at times. It wasn't exactly adventurous in what she was writing, and that's the thing, not all albums need to be like that. There are many albums that aren't written very well that I've probably praised in the past for various reasons. Perhaps it's to do with the sound, perhaps it's to do with how the singer presents themselves or the kind of charisma that they have. Perhaps it's just the songs are just so enjoyable that you can ignore the lyrics and things like that. And there are variations of this in music throughout the history of the music of all time. Like, it's always going to be like this. You'll excuse some songs, but for others you might think, that's not very good because it just doesn't sound that good. And that was the thing with Golden Hour. Like, I could excuse some of the writing because the production was really good. I mean, tracks like Slow Burn are just stunning. Like, it has a really lovely build. The production is really interesting. Like, there's just moments on that album that I can kind of go, yeah, the lyrics aren't great, but I like the songs. Since then, though, it's like the music and the lyrics are both just not that interesting or engaging. And the thing with this album, Deeper Well, was that on my first listen, I was okay with it. I was happy with the music. It was nice. It was pleasant. It was sweet. It was soft. There wasn't anything particularly offensive about it. It just didn't stand out that much, really, in terms of its sound. It was just pretty much going through the motions on every track. But I thought it at least sounded somewhat nice. But now, with more and more listens, I've just kind of like grown old and bored of it, really. And I've grown a lot listening to it as well, listening to some of these lyrics, because it just doesn't even feel like Kacey is even trying with her writing anymore. Like, I was pretty shocked because on my first listen, I didn't really pay attention to what she was saying, really. But then when I started to read the lyrics after multiple listens, I was just a bit like, good God, Kacey, this is like really not good writing. It's pretty much right out the gate, this is noticeable, to be honest, because you've got this opening track, which is a dedication to a lost friend and how she's seen this bird or the cardinal, and it's like a sign that her friend is like watching over her and, you know, is there, and maybe the friend has Kacey on their mind, and then it kind of starts making her feel like, I know that my friend's always with me, that kind of thing. And this, in a nutshell, is a pretty cliche concept, really. But the thing is that she doesn't really put her own spin on it. Like, it's a nice idea for a song, it's a nice sentiment for a song, but like, she just kind of touches on the surface of the whole thing and doesn't really go that much into detail with how she's feeling about it all or how it impacts her. Like, it's just all like surface level. Like, it's touching everything so softly and doesn't really dive into it and go any deeper. And look, I can forgive this song at least because it's about something nice. It's about something that means something to her. I just think it could have been a bit more detailed, but I can't forgive the rest of the album because it just gets worse from here. Actually, you've got friggin' Deeper Well, where the opening line is my Saturn my Saturn has returned, which from this moment I was like, oh my god, we're going into horoscope shit already. Like 2 tracks in, we're touching on the horoscopes, and you can tell that she has a pretty basic understanding of this kind of thing as well, like with Cardinal as well, where it's just like touching on the surface. She doesn't really go into that much detail. It's almost like she heard the idea of a Saturn returning one time, maybe speaking to somebody, and thought, let me just make a song about it. I won't research what it really even means or go into that much detail about it. I'll just talk about how I was 27, and that's usually about the age that your Saturn returns. It's just like there's just no extra meat on the bone at all. You hit the track Too Good to Be True, and it kind of strikes you how little variation there's been from track to track within 3 songs. Now, sure, it's only 3 songs in, that's not that many, but God, we're really just hitting the same sound, the same tone, the same feel for every song. The vocals don't really shake up. I could say the sound of the album doesn't really shake up. It's very much just simple acoustic plucking with Kacey's singing pretty casually, pretty softly over these tracks, and like that's it for every song. There's no peaks and troughs, there's no like emotional swells where the songs might build, or like she kind of goes a bit more like I don't know, amped up with her vocals. Like she's just really doing the bare minimum on this album. It just needs far more range, it just needs far more emotion. Like she's singing about all these different topics in such a basic way mostly, but she's doing it in the same way for every song, and it's like you can't really feel the differences in emotions between each track. Like I think that's why when I wasn't reading the lyrics I was okay with this album, because I was just like, yeah, she's singing nicely, she's singing well, the tracks sound lovely, and that was kind of how I was fine with it. But once I delved into the lyrics and listening to her talk about all these different things and hearing her sing them all in the same way was just a bit like, oh wow, I should have just not touched the lyrics. Moving Out was the point on the album where I realised that Kacey Musgraves just has a rhyming problem, because she just doesn't know how to come up with exciting or interesting rhyme schemes, really. It's very much just, like I wrote down here, she's rhyming things like had and mad and place and space. And it really just feels like my first poetry lesson with some of these writing ideas, because she really doesn't think outside the box with her rhymes. And it just gets really, really dull quickly. And the thing with this track as well, which I also noticed, was how, like, the storytelling of how she has all this attachment to this house and how she's, you know, has so many memories attached to it. And she doesn't really have an interesting story to tell about the house in any point of the song. It's basically just, do you remember that Christmas party we had? And then we were sick all night, but we still kept partying. And it's just like the most basic stories you could ever think of, that anyone who's ever had a house probably has the same story to tell. And it's just by the end of the song, I'm just like, good God, this is the most boring story I've ever heard. And despite the fact that she says she's so excited about leaving, but also feels sad, like you don't even feel the emotions in the track at all. I don't even know where to start with Heart of the Woods, man. What the hell is this Facebook mum posting, honestly? Like that first opening lines of the track literally sound like something you'd see on like one of those like nice images, and then your mum shares it or something on Facebook as just a sort of like nice sentimental thing. It's just a bit like, what is this writing? And it's like, it's in our nature to care for one another, and it's just la-di-da-di-da. The architect, she's talking to me about an apple and telling me about how it's constructed in such a sweet and divine way. It's so simple, but I want to speak to the architect about this because it's just such an amazing... What are you talking about? What are you talking about? And don't you even dare. I see you typing, about to say, you just don't understand metaphors. It's obviously a metaphor, Ryan. Yeah, friggin' no. It's like the worst metaphor I've ever friggin' heard is what it is. Got Heaven Is as well, where she's talking about how when we die, do we go up in the sky and ride white horses And again, the rhyme is just like, come on, Kacey, can you not have thought of anything better than that? But also, it's not even just that. It's like the most simplistic view of what heaven could be I've ever heard. Like, I can't believe how simplistic it is. When you think of like some of the best songwriters like Nick Cave, who talks about these things in such vast ways that you've never heard of, and he just goes into so much detail, and then you've got this. You kind of just have to scratch your head a little bit and go, good God, like she really didn't think that hard about this, did she? This song could be so interesting. This song could be so poetic. This song could be so beautiful. But it is none of those things, and she just has the most surface level, again, interpretation of what heaven could be I've ever heard. I'm not even exaggerating here, guys. Like, I could ask a class of year 5s or 6s about heaven, and they could come up with something far more profound and interesting than this song. And people really do underestimate the intelligence of like 10, 11-year-olds, because I think we just think everyone younger than us isn't very smart. But honestly, you'd be surprised, and I really do think I would have got more engaging answers than riding white horses in the sky easily. I can't even get into the anime eyes schlop like Sailor Moon ain't got nothing on me. Look, I'm not even that big of an anime fan myself, but Jesus Christ. This is just, again, coming across like somebody who's just engaged with something one time and then decided to write a song about it. Just like I said about Cardinal. Or even Heaven is like that too, really. I will say, in terms of the sound of the album, there is one track that stands out that doesn't make me feel like I'm listening to the same song on repeat over and over again. And I think you can probably guess, if you have heard this album already, that track is easily Lonely Millionaire. I mean, if you haven't heard this album, what I'm about to say might surprise you, but she samples Jid. Yes, I mean the rapper Jid on this track, which was so unexpected. Jid apparently himself was pretty like impressed with the song and was really happy about it, I think he said somewhere. So yeah, you know, like, fair enough. Just in terms of a sample that's so unexpected, this would definitely be up there for me. Like a country artist sampling Jid, really random. But anyway, this track at least sounds a little bit different. The beat is a bit more memorable, of course. It is pretty much the same beat as that song. It just sounds like she's going for something a little bit different. It's not just the same kind of plucky guitar. The only thing with this track is that while the lyrics are pretty decent, you know, the idea of somebody who's got all the money in the world but just doesn't like have anybody really, and you know, you have to be careful what you wish for or you might be left on your own. Like, it's a decent sentiment, but again, really, it feels quite surface level, because I've just heard this idea done so many times. We've heard this said so many times. We've seen this in films and TV, this idea of somebody who has all the money but doesn't have that many friends, etc., etc. Like, it's just the most basic level concept you can think of, really. And again, she isn't really putting her own spin on it. It's just super, super simplistic. I know it sounds like I'm really hating on this album, but ultimately I don't hate it. I think overall the sound is all okay. Her performances vocally are fine. Even if there's very little variation in either of those things, it sounds decent. I mean, like I said, before I'd even paid attention to the lyrics, I thought this was a solid album. It is just the lyrics that really do drastically bring it down. And the problem with this album, across the board, it's just so unimaginative. Like, it is really unimaginative. The ideas, the concept for the songs, the individual rhyming patterns within the tracks, Kacey's singing, Kacey's vision for these songs, the performances musically, the production, everything is just so bland and plain, and there's just no imagination that's gone into any of this at all. It just really surprises me and shocks me how little it sounds like she's trying now. Like, it just doesn't feel like there's been much effort put into much of this album at all, to be honest, which I know may sound harsh, but I just think there was a time where Kacey was a much better writer than this. She was more dynamic as a vocalist. She came through with more variation in how the songs sound. It's so difficult to separate each individual track from one another on this album, because they all really do just sound the same. I just think in terms of, like, you know, great singer-songwriter albums that you could come across, This just is kind of far from that. Like, there are so many other interesting writers out there are so many more interesting producers out there that would have just come up with more interesting elements to make this album just feel a little different from track to track. There would have been more production ideas, there would have been more instrumentation, there just would have been more to it, and this album just feels so bare in all aspects that it really shocks me how much we've kind of lost all of that creativity from Kacey. I don't know where it's all gone. My score may surprise you because I think you probably were expecting a really low one, but honestly, I don't dislike this album massively. I'm going to go 5 out of 10. I think it's just really average across the board. That's the thing when I think this album. There isn't anything that's done terribly. It's just all done in the most average kind of tick the boxes and get it done way that I would expect from such a popular artist now. I mean, this album's probably going to do good numbers. This album's definitely going to be nominated for Grammys. And for an album that's going to have that kind of stature attached to it, you need more than just doing this, I think. But yeah, that's just how I feel. Hit me up in the comments if you want to get some recommendations for other singer-songwriter albums I could recommend to you that I think are just more interesting. I'm happy to do that. Let me know your thoughts in the comments as well. Check out my Patreon, check out my other videos, subscribe to the channel as well. Hopefully you've enjoyed this video, hopefully you agree with me. If you don't, tell me why. Have a good day and goodbye. That's a Kacey Musgraves rhyme right there. Goodbye.